Naut CEM, o helix and quinas natachal etiakias, sahweltanat sanasnat shochlamisan. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this evening's event with a poem that I wrote that looks at the Lummi concept of Eithutchning, which expresses the idea of good feelings, but more importantly, it expresses the idea of being of one heart and one mind within yourself and with others. The poem is called Resonance, with an epigraph by Anaxagoras. All things were together, the mind came and arranged them. The flicker of a wave on the sea is a flame, not like a candle on a cake, keeping tally of our days. Instead, the fire measures life together by the sweetness of resonance, how, exalted by the dawn, we as one have sung our true song, become a single voice across the waves. The wax of a candle begins inside the humming darkness of a hive, but before that, it begins as sunlight, calling forth blossoms, pollen, and bees, bees who play matchmaker to trees, calling forth fruit to become new seeds. Where does love begin? It is a surprise, but obvious and easy, like breathing. It has been there all along, a flicker on the sea that swam up from the deep, to touch air and light, to shine like fire, leap from its element the way a tree becomes a boat so the earth can leap into the sea and sail toward adventure. Things are changed, things transform. This is the way the mind arranged it. The mind comes and arranges, the heart draws it all back toward union, washes away the illusion of separateness, gives new measures for happiness, a new way to celebrate the state of being of one heart and one mind. Eithutchning, our song is a ferry that joins two shores.
Thank you so much, Rena.
Thank you.
Welcome to the 2021 Bedtime Stories fundraising event. I'm Lauren Dupree, an actor, vocalist, writer, and filmmaker, and I'm honored and excited to guide you through the program this evening. We're streaming to you all live from Block 41 in Seattle and are so thrilled to have you with us tonight. Rena, thanks again so much for kicking off the evening with your poem, Resonance. Rena was named Washington State Poet Laureate in April and will serve for 2 years, building appreciation for poetry throughout our state. She is a member of the Lummi Nation and first Indigenous poet to hold the position. But first and foremost, she is a gifted poet and through her work draws attention to critical issues facing our natural world. Her debut collection of poetry, Patriarchy Blues, received an American Book Award. I encourage you all to check it out. Humanities Washington is pleased to partner with Arts Washington on the Poet Laureate program, and it is the first example you'll see tonight of Humanities Washington's vital work across the state. Before we go further in our program, it is important to recognize that Humanities Washington and its partner organizations across the state do their work on the ancestral homelands of Native peoples. Currently, there are 42 tribes, 35 of which are federally recognized, that share traditional homelands in what is now Washington State. We express our deepest respect for and gratitude towards these original and current caretakers of the region. For more than 20 years, Humanities Washington has hosted this annual fundraiser. We typically gather in person to hear original works from Northwest authors as we enjoy dinner together. As we started planning for this year, we had hoped to return to our original routine and be together again in person. However, for reasons we're all tired of discussing, we decided it was best to take a different direction. We're thankful that tonight we can at least be together again virtually. Before we get started, I want to mention 2 technical notes. First, if you have any technical difficulties, please call the Humanities Washington office for assistance at 206-682-1770. Second, closed captioning is available through YouTube. You may turn it on if you'd like. Now, let me offer a little preview of what to expect tonight. You'll have the opportunity to hear original stories from Pacific Northwest authors who use the theme Together Again as their inspiration. As you listen to the stories, you'll notice that our authors each have a very different take on what together again means during a pandemic. Humanities Washington's CEO, Julie Ziegler, will share an organization update. We'll hear from two pros involved with Humanities Washington's Primetime Family Reading Program. They'll talk about how teaching families to read and discuss books together nurtures children into long-time learners. And most importantly, we'll have an opportunity to support Humanities Washington. I can't stress enough during these tumultuous times how much that support is needed and leveraged. Humanities Washington programs open minds and bridge divides by creating important spaces, online and in person, to explore different perspectives. Tonight, our goal is to raise $80,000 to support programs that promote dialogue, discovery, and greater understanding of the people and world around us. How can you support Humanities Washington? Tonight, you'll have an opportunity to make a donation that supports our work. And you can add to that donation by purchasing a nightstand package that includes 3 books written by tonight's authors. We'll ship them straight to your doorstep. You can make a gift and purchase books at any time. Simply text bedtime to 76278 and follow the link that is sent to you. Go to bedtime.givesmart.com or give us a call at 206-682-1770, extension 105. Before we introduce our first author, let's take a minute to recognize our Bedtime Stories sponsors: Alaska Airlines, Columbia Bank, the Hugh and Jane Ferguson Foundation, Guard Capital, Jeffress Wood Foundation, the Spokesman Review, the Stone Group of Companies, along with our generous individual sponsors who are listed on the screen. Thank you. We appreciate your continued commitment to Humanities Washington and Bedtime Stories. We'd also like to thank our Board of Trustees. The names of our dedicated board leaders are on your screen. We appreciate their thoughtful guidance and time dedicated to the mission of Humanities Washington, particularly over the past 18 months. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our first author, Jess Walter. Jess is the author of 9 books, most recently the national bestseller, The Cold Millions, and #1 New York Times bestseller, Beautiful Ruins, The Zero, finalist for the National Book Award, and Citizen Vince, winner of the Edgar Award. His work has been published in 32 languages, and his short fiction has appeared 3 times in Best American Short Stories. Tonight, he will read Return to Aforementioned Island.
Return to Aforementioned Island. Then it was over. We began seeing airplanes in the sky again, cars on the road, restaurants reopened, stadiums filled. Our son could return to middle school. My wife and I could go back to work. As suddenly as it had started, it ended. That weekend, I shaved my beard and shed the sweatpants I'd been wearing for months. Sunday night, we ate a last dinner together, just the 3 of us. My moody 13-year-old son, Dean, my wife, Rena, and me. The clank of our forks, the only noise in the dining room. We were all a bit uneasy, readying ourselves for this coming flood of normalcy. That night, while Rena and Dean watched television, I went upstairs and stood in front of the mirror, practicing shaking hands and pushing elevator buttons. I rehearsed holding a cup of coffee and laughing at my coworkers' jokes. Hilarious, Dave. I woke early Monday morning, showered, dressed, and found myself back in front of that same full-length mirror, the ends of a red-checked necktie draped down either side of my crisp white shirt. And then a moment of disconnection, of panic. Was the fat end or the skinny end supposed to be longer? It was such a small thing. I could simply try one, then the other, until I figured it out, a 50-50 chance. But as I stood there, staring at my necktie, my heart began to race. What if I never remembered? I began to wonder if this wasn't something else, a deeper reticence. I hated to admit it, but I hadn't entirely minded social distancing, quarantine, the easing of social pressure. It was nice not to have to see the in-laws. And the obligations. Come to this charity auction, come to that community meeting. You're late for this, you forgot that. Christmas at my parents', sorry, not safe. Our niece's wedding, we can't possibly fly to Houston. If I was being honest, I had liked staying home for a year. If I was really being honest, I was kind of repelled by many of my fellow humans, by their demands and politics, their fits and phobias, biases and germs. I didn't want to return to all of that. I sensed it in Rena, too, this unease about our imminent return to the outside world. We'd grown used to the solitude. We lived on an island with takeout and Netflix and family game night and a wine club that delivered Syrah by the case. The case! And what happened when people were rescued from islands? They had trouble adjusting to civilization, that's what. I recalled a movie where Tom Hanks was rescued from a desert island and he didn't like to wear shoes afterward. I was looking down at my own uncomfortable shoes when Dean came in, my son wearing his school uniform, khakis with a blue polo. He looked me in the eye. "So we're doing this," he said, "just pretending it's over." "Apparently," I said. "You do know these things don't just end because we want them to," Dean said. "Viral mutations, civil unrest, this is not over." In 180 AD, everyone believed the Antonine Plague had ended, only to have Marcus Aurelius fall sick, his horrible death bringing about an end to the golden age of Rome. I showed him the two sides of my tie. "You don't happen to remember, loop it around your neck," he said, "and hang it from the rafters." I looked up. We didn't have rafters. Dean grabbed my arm, an unhinged look in his eye. "Listen," he hissed, "I can't do this. I can't do PE. It's medieval. Take off your clothes and put on these other clothes, and for 50 minutes let the strong ones beat the weak ones? Who thought of this? It's barbarism." He was quite upset. I searched my memory. There was something I always used to say in moments like this before, as the father, the head of house, the paterfamilias, something reassuring. Then, like a vision, it came to me. "Do your best," I said. "Dear God," Dean turned and stumbled from the room. I could hear him down the hall. "This is madness." A moment later, my wife came in, wearing a floor-length organza gown with a string of pearls around her neck. "This isn't right, is it?" she said. "Oh, no, I don't think so," I said. "Where'd you get it?" She pointed to the corner of our bedroom and said quietly, with wonder, "Did you know there's another, smaller room adjacent to our bedroom?" "Yes," I said, "the closet. It was where I had found the necktie and the shiny, uncomfortable shoes, the pants with creases down the legs." "It's filled with things like this," my wife said. "There's a coat in there." She bent in and whispered, "I think it might be made from the skin of an animal." "Well, I wouldn't wear that either," I said. "There must be something suitable in there." "I guess," she said, but then she looked from the closet to me, a low-grade terror rising in her eyes. "But Randall, I can't remember. What is it we do?" "Do? For a living. After I put on the proper clothing, where do I go? What do I do?" Her insecurity was endearing. I don't think I've ever felt more affection for my wife than I did just then. I remembered the pretty girl that I had met back in, well, at the, it wasn't important where we'd met. I had met her somewhere, that much was clear. All I could do now was exude the preternatural calm that I suspected had defined me before all of this, as the paterfamilias, father, male, alpha. This was my role, one might say. We all have roles. I said as much to Rena. We all have roles, I said. The economy is a complex web of production, automation, and labor, and required therein is a professional management class of highly trained, she was staring at me. I cleared my throat, bent over, and grabbed the brown briefcase at my feet. I held it out for her to see. "I go places," I said, "with this." "Yes," relief showed on her face. "You do," she said. "I remember." She ran a hand across the smooth leather of the case. Then she said, "What's in it?" "Oh." I held the case out, and we both stared at it. It was unfathomable. "Well, I suspect certain items of commerce, various accoutrements of a man of my station." "Ah." She smiled at my sense of calm and fingered the pearls around her neck. "And what about me? What do I do?" "You? Well, thankfully Dean came back in then. In 429 BC, Pericles lost both his sons to the plague, he said. They were heirs to the throne, and while Spartans besieged his beloved city-state, Pericles died in unspeakable anguish, pustules bursting, servants wailing in agony at his tortured cries, a horror that even his great wealth and power could not abate as he coughed up blood and cursed his very birth. His death, also the death of Athens, the death of democracy itself, setting civilization back hundreds of years. Dean pointed at me as if in warning. Do I have to take hot lunch? Yes, I said. Ah, he yelled, I hate pizza rolls. This is lunacy. Do your best, I said. Dean, Rena reached for our son's arm. What do I do? I was happy to be off the hook. It can be exhausting being the paterfamilias, especially when you're not even entirely sure what that means. So I was glad to have his help. Yes, I said, answer your mother. What does she do? He sighed. She demands so much from me that I can never fully satisfy her unreasonable expectations. And then, when I let her down, which I inevitably do, she forgives me so unconditionally with such selfless, infantilizing love that the only disappointment left is that which I have for myself, a condition of self-loathing so paralyzing it means I might never grow into a fully functional adult human being. It was quiet in the room. You're a speech therapist, Dean said finally. There you go, I said to my wife. You give speeches and people find it therapeutic. That's not what that is, Dean said. Then do your best, I said to Rena. God help us, Dean said, and he left the room. My wife and I were quiet then. Me with the two ends of my tie, Elena fiddling with her pearls as, wait, she said, I thought my name was Rena. What? Just now you thought Elena fiddling with her pearls, but earlier you called me Rena. Well, I said, let's not get hung up on, there are many, the economy is a complex web of, it's fine. She waved me off, exhausted. Elena is nice too. She held out a pair of clip-on earrings. But what do I do with these? Those? I took them from her, pinched the two sides of my tie, and used the earrings to clip them together. See, I said, it's fine, darling. We can do this. But Jared, she said. I looked around the empty room. Apparently she meant me. Yes? She figured the small end of my tie. I'm frightened. I looked up. Still no rafters in the ceiling. Me too, I admitted. And when I looked down again, Dean was back in our room, leaning on the doorway. He shook his head, straightened, and walked up to me. He took the earrings off my tie and gently clipped them onto my wife's lobes. I suppose if we're going to do this, he said, we should try not to look totally insane. He walked past us and into the closet. My wife and I exchanged a worried glance. But after a moment, our son emerged again with a midnight blue skirt, a white short-sleeved blouse, and black sandals. Try this, he said to my wife, and pointed her toward the bathroom. Then he turned his attention to me. He seemed different somehow, older than when this had all started. He grabbed the two ends of my tie. Relax, he said. He pulled the wide end, wrapped it, and crossed it over the skinny end, then brought it down through the loop he'd made. See, not so different than tying shoelaces, he said. And I was about to ask where he'd learned such a thing when I had a distant memory of having taught it to him myself. He snugged the knotted tie up against my throat. Then he patted my chest. He bent down and opened my briefcase, held it up for me to see. Nothing to be afraid of here, he said. So I bent down and looked inside. There was a stack of brochures and documents, a blur of numbers and pie charts. I looked up in confusion. You work in finance, Dean said, with something less than pride. You sell shares of a fund that buys distressed real estate, suburban tracts, mini malls, old trailer courts, and transforms those assets into arcane, destructive financial instruments that spread ownership among other funds and banks, generating massive wealth for your clients while guaranteeing the poor will never own their own homes. Oh, I said, I'm not sure I understood that. I wouldn't worry about it, Dean said. Nobody does. My wife came out then in the blouse and skirt. You look beautiful. I looked at Dean. Rena, he said. Rena, I said. A smile came over her face then. She took my hand. Thank you, Jared. Randall, said Dean. Randall, said Rena. And it all came flooding back. I'd met her at our beach club. We were introduced by my old college roommate. We were the Mortons, Randall and Rena. We had a second house in the San Juans. We have a second house, I said, and Rena called back, in the San Juans, and we embraced. When we separated, I saw that Dean was holding a note. I will help you, he said, in exchange for this. The note was written in block letters. It excused him from playing something called big ball soccer in his PE class because of his asthma. You have asthma, I said. I'm sorry, is it serious? He shrugged. I signed the note and handed it back to him. You guys can do this, Dean said. Listen, in the 14th century, the Black Plague, the worst pandemic in human history, swept through Europe, killing half the population and reducing humankind to levels of poverty and sorrow not seen in 1,000 years. But do you know what immediately followed that dark age? Dinner? Rena asked. The Renaissance, Dean said. Because it proved unable to stop the plague, the church's hold on people was broken and an unprecedented explosion of science followed. Medicine, astronomy, philosophy, art, a big bang of knowledge, the fruits of which we continue to bear in music and physics, literature, a flowering of the very best of humanity. Democracy and peace and fairness too, the very idea of human rights. Perhaps we too can emerge from this dark cave of superstition and ignorance in which we've been living the last few years and recommit ourselves to a better, fairer, more sustainable world. Rena and I stared at him, terribly moved. I can't overstate the pride I felt then, the love, the profound mystery of parenting, to have created such a being. I nearly wept. I turned to Rena. I think he's right, I said. Yes, she said, we can do this. And we embraced again. I grabbed my car keys. I'll drive, I said. I'll drop you off at the speech therapy factory. Clinic, said Dean. Clinic, I said. And then we'll go to the office, Dean said. Office, I said. Rena and I started for the door. Your shoes are on the wrong feet, Dean said, all 4 of them. But we couldn't wait. Dean had taken us this far, but Rena and I had to do the rest. To venture back into a world rife with dark age misinformation and fear and battle for rationality and compassion. To fight for a world worthy of our child. I was at the door when Dean called out to me. Hey, Dad, I turned. Open the garage door before you back the car out. I pointed my fingers and winked. I'll do my best.
Thank you, Jess, for bringing some comedic relief to what has truly been a wild time. It's comforting to know that maybe I'm not the only one who doesn't know how to function outside of my house anymore. Now we have the opportunity to hear about Humanities Washington's work over this past year from our CEO, Julie Ziegler. Julie has led the organization since 2009 and served several terms on the Board of Trustees before taking on her current role.
Hello, everyone. I really wish that we would all be together in person, but I'm happy that you are with us here tonight. So this past year was certainly a difficult one, with pain, loss, and disruption serving as the backdrop of our collective experience. It was one of those rare periods where everyone shared varying versions of the same anxiety and grief. As a humanities organization, we provide Washington's communities with opportunities to find common ground through shared experiences. The onset of COVID-19 was an unprecedented shared experience, and just as the world was beginning to understand the enormity and the duration of the pandemic, our nation also began to reckon with the degree to which racial inequality still affects Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. Our programming in the last year responded to these dual concerns, helping people find meaning, context, and solace in the humanities. Humanities Washington provides programming for curious minds of all ages, but the work we get to do with young people is particularly meaningful. Through our Primetime Family Reading Program, we strengthen the reading skills of struggling 3rd and 4th graders and engage entire families in the discovery of great books and big ideas. Discussion of ideas is key to learning. Primetime doesn't just teach kids how to decode words. It poses important questions about story themes and characters' choices. It pushes kids to think deeply and articulate their own questions and concerns and beliefs. It often leads to a magical exchange between families, too. For instance, as you'll probably experience in just a few moments, we hear parents describe the dreams they had as children, how those dreams changed over time, and how the dreams they have now for their children are exactly the dreams that they want to have for themselves. It's powerful stuff. Tonight, we're excited to share a short demonstration of this beloved Humanities Washington program, Primetime Family Reading. It will feature Jared Lysing and Jeremy Cooper. Jared Lysing is a tenured faculty in the English department and Humanities chair at Cascadia College in Bothell. Jared has contributed his expertise as a humanities scholar at Primetime programs since 2013. He's served communities from Mukilteo to Monroe. Jeremy Cooper is a special education specialist with the Seattle School District. Jeremy has been bringing his enthusiastic readings to Primetime Families since 2014, serving as a storyteller and scholar at programs from White Center to Fall City. Jared and Jeremy, we're looking forward to your Primetime sampler.
Thank you, Julie. There's a handful of things that Primetime does, and the key thing is it delivers a quality humanities experience. It increases public library use, and it increases family bonding and reading time. The other thing it does is it really affects people's attitudes around reading, and lastly, it improves academic achievement. And here's how it works. Jeremy and I eat dinner at the library with these families. We create a circle. We hear a story from a storyteller. And then we have a discussion about this story where children and adults participate, which is key to this program. Each week has a theme, and we want to give you a taste of the Primetime theme, focusing on dreams. Jeremy?
So we're going to do a little excerpt from Fanny's Dream by Carolyn and Mark Buhner. So we'll get started here, friends. Once upon a time, in a wild Wyoming town, there lived a sturdy girl named Fanny Agnes. She worked from sunup to sundown on her daddy's farm, but she had her dreams. She was going to marry a prince, or at least the mayor's son. He would be tall, handsome, and have a dozen carriages. He would kiss her hand, dress her in silks and satins, and never let her do another stitch of work. If it could happen once upon a time, Fanny believed, it could happen again. After all, what were fairy godmothers for? When she heard that the mayor was going to have a grand ball, Fanny was so excited, she pulled up a row of carrots and left the weeds instead. This had to be it. So in between, here and there, Fanny begins a life that she didn't expect. Answering questions like, can you twirl and waltz and curtsy? No, but I can harness a horse, plow a field, and shuck corn. Marriage, kids, working a farm, the joy and effort life gives and takes until finally her fairy godmother shows up. Fanny Agnes jumped up as her fairy godmother twinkled down. You poor dear, having to wait all these years, her fairy godmother gushed, but there's still time. There's a visiting colonel at the mayor's ball tonight. Just leave it to me, I'll fix everything. But, Fanny hesitated. What's the matter? Her fairy godmother stamped impatiently. Do you want to go to the ball or not? Fanny looked down at her work-roughened hands. She looked at the little house where Heber was reading to Davy, Ethan, and Edna Faye. Not, Fanny said, and she went back into the house. Who are you talking to out there, Fan? Heber asked. My fairy godmother, Hebe. Heber laughed. Oh, sure, and I'm the Princess of Heba. Close enough, Fanny winked. Close enough.
Jeremy, do you think Fanny was right to give up her dream?
I think she wanted something that she really didn't know that she was going to get, and I think she received exactly what she needed. So,
But suppose it was something other than live in a big house, dance at a ball. Would that make a difference in terms of whether she gave it up?
I don't think so. I think she got exactly what she was looking for in her family and her farm.
With this next question, I want to invite the audience to share some ideas. So put your kind of ideas or things that are coming to you in the chat or the comments, depending on how you're tuning in. And the question is, do dreams change? And if so, how or why do they change? For example, have any of your dreams changed?
Pretty much every one of them. I was going to be a rock star by now, worldwide famous. That didn't happen. So how about you, Jared?
Well, I wanted to be a professional tennis player, and a writer, then a teacher. But what I think is kind of funny is I'm still sort of playing tennis, I'm still writing, I'm still teaching, and somehow, like, as dreams change, they kind of compound or become a part of one another in a way that I think is interesting. So it's sort of like thinking about how do you live a good life, and I think that's what this story is also about too. So the thing with primetime is that, you know, we have kids who are 6 to 10-year-olds, you know, kind of thinking about these big ideas, asking these questions. And, you know, when I think about just talking about this with you all, is I'm reminded of the individual stories that we've experienced with kids. One of them is I remember a child who did not do well in a school setting, but she thrived in prime time. And I heard this from, you know, the school librarian who was also working with us. And this was sort of like one of the key takeaways is that we create a space for kids where it might be different from what they're used to, but it also builds this literacy in. How about you, Jeremy?
I've had a few. We do a lot of work with families where English is their second language, sometimes their third language. And I had one in particular, a grandmother who's Pakistani, told me through the interpreter that she didn't understand a word I was saying, but she loved to listen to me read the stories because they made her laugh. And I've also had another mother that told me whose son wasn't much of a reader. When they were practicing at home, reading the stories, that she wasn't reading it like Jeremy did at prime time, and he asked her to read it the right way. So those are the things that I take away that make me feel good as the storyteller here in these sessions.
Thanks. Lauren, we're going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Julie, Jared, and Jeremy. Primetime Family Reading was made available virtually during COVID. It is just one of the great programs that Humanities Washington offers. In addition to Primetime, your gift tonight will support great programs statewide like Speakers Bureau, scholar-led conversations on current issues and compelling topics that are delivered online and in person, Poet Laureate readings and workshops, apprenticeship programs in our Center for Cultural Traditions, important discussions on democracy, civic engagement, and so much more. During the pandemic, and honestly, even before that, we've all suffered from a flight to isolation, literal social distance. As it becomes safe to gather again, we can anticipate a flight to community, a deep, driving desire to reconnect with others, to learn, to solve community issues, and to emerge better than before. Humanities Washington is in the business of encouraging critical thinking and community building. Community is built through earnest discourse, deep listening, storytelling, and the allied building blocks of human connection. That is the work that happens through Primetime. That is the work offered by our community builders who lead the Speakers Bureau and democracy programs. It is the work of our Poet Laureate. As our society has become more divided than ever, Humanities Washington's work is more important than ever. I'm asking you tonight to help Humanities Washington build more informed, engaged, and compassionate communities. You can help Humanities Washington open minds and bridge divides all across our state with your generous donation tonight. Your gift will support Humanities Washington programming. Our fundraising goal tonight is $80,000. Can you help us reach the goal? What do you think of joining Jay and Jane Rich with a gift of $5,000? Or you can join Peter Danello, Colleen and Steve Razilis, Mary Pembroke Perlin and David Perlin, with a gift of $3,000. Or how about $2,500? Thank you, Cynthia Wells and Tim Kerr, and Betsy and Dave Godlewski for your gifts. Maybe $2,000 is a good fit. Anne-Marie Canyo, David Powers and Amy Shazanov, Carly Schiffner and Summer Hahn, we thank you for your gifts at this level. I know that gifts are rolling in, so let's take a look at our progress so far. All right, so we are very close to our goal. We're at $68,794. So please keep those gifts coming in so we can hit our goal of $80,000. This is so incredible. Let's keep it going. And I see more and more coming in. Allison Campbell, thank you so much. All right, can you join our $1,500 donors? Karen and Tom Ellick, Lucia, and Leo Huntington, Dan Lamberton and Linda Andrews, Eric Lawson and Heather Harden. I just flew my ring off because I am so excited about these donations. What about giving at $1,000? Thank you, Veronica and Mel Bradley, Betsy and Tom Swanson, and Rosemary and Sam Sellinger for your gifts at this level. And I'm seeing more and more donations come in. Please just keep them coming. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, thank you, Jeffrey Feldman and Bridget and Paul Piper for your gifts at this level. I believe the $500 level, yes. How about $250? Thank you, Marite Butners and Maria Boulon Fernandez for your gifts at this level. This is so wonderful watching your donations come in, yes. Jeffrey Feldman, I see your name on the screen again. Thank you so much, Lee Doyle. Thank you so much for your gifts. Every gift is so important to our work. $100, $50, $25, or even $5 supports programs that bring people together. So thank you so much. Just keep the donations coming in so we can hit that $80,000 goal. Now, you have plenty of time to complete your donation while we listen to stories shared by our next two authors. Next up is Tiffany Midge. Tiffany is a citizen of the Standing Rock Sioux Nation and was raised in the Pacific Northwest. A former humor columnist for Indian Country Today, she taught writing and composition for Northwest Indian College and served as poet laureate for the small college town where she resides. Tiffany is the author of the memoir, Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's, and poetry collections, The Woman Who Married a Bear and Horns. She is the recipient of a 2020 Pushcart Prize, the Kenyon Review Earthworks Indigenous Poetry Prize, a Western Heritage Award, and she was awarded a 2019-20 Simons Public Humanities Fellowship for University of Kansas Hall Center for the Humanities. She aspires to be the distinguished writer in residence for Seattle's Space Needle and considers her contribution to humanity to be her sparkly personality. Tiffany has written and recorded her story, Will There Be Any Unusual Side Effects?
Hi, I'm Tiffany Midge, and I'll be reading Will There Be Any Unusual Side Effects? The last time I saw my mother alive, she hadn't been entirely alive. My auntie had conveyed this with an authority risen from experience, having taken care of other people through their ends of life. She was no stranger. She's already gone. She's not there, Auntie Lena said. Except my mother's eyes were open, messaging distress, and her limbs kicked and flailed as if she was capsized in water, splashing from the depths, aiming for purchase. But she was not really there, Auntie Lena had insisted. Whatever the case may have been, whether consciously present or already gone, her body, a shell reduced to mere electrical synapses, I had thought without question, this is the last time I'll see her living. And then they removed her from the machines, and she wound down like an old watch, the hands ticking slower and slower until at last they stopped. So some 5 years later, when I trundled half asleep into the kitchen at 3 a.m. for a drink of water from the faucet and saw her sitting there, calm as you please, playing solitaire and nursing a cup of stale coffee at my dining room table, I've had to revise my understanding of the last time I saw my mother alive to, it's complicated. Mother never felt at home in the Pacific Northwest. She missed the big wide open of Montana and North Dakota plains, the way the skies went on forever. She'd felt hemmed in by all the trees, the forests of Washington state. She couldn't see through to the horizon, except, of course, on the Sound, on the Pacific Ocean. She'd made compromises just for those days spent on the beaches. She collected white stones on those beaches, Mo Clips, Ruby Beach, Ocean Shores. She collected sand dollars, installed hundreds of them along the south end of her house, along the driveway. Her good luck charm, she called them, her riches. The morning after talking to my dear departed mother, I reluctantly and against my better judgment told Gavin, "You were just dreaming, Jessie," he said. "I think I know when I'm awake or dreaming," I said. "Of course you were. Come on, honey, that's just not possible. You're telling me that you had a whole conversation with a ghost. Your mother's spirit found its way from the other side or whatever to our kitchen, and the two of you talked about what dress you should wear to your cousin's wedding?" "No," I said. "Lila's wedding, my sister's, remember? This June?" And Mom felt strongly about the lavender floral one with the bell sleeves. We looked through a bunch of them online together, and then she helped me clip coupons. I gestured to the pile of coupons, the 2 pairs of scissors. Gavin rubbed his face, taking a beat to measure whatever shock or awe he thought he should react to. "This is beside the point, but did she think it was a good idea to go to the wedding?" Gavin asked, fishing for a possible out. He and Lila had weirdness between them. I tried to stay out of it. "She did, actually," I said. "She said as long as it was outdoors and we wore masks that it would be fine." "Oh, she did she? I guess she would know, right?" Gavin said, smirking. "You don't have to believe me. I know it's a lot to take in," I said. Gavin looked searchingly out the window as if he thought he would find a definitive answer in the way the wind blew through the leaves. It was still before 9, and we were having our morning coffee. He shifted in his chair to look directly at me. "Wait a sec, Jessie. Is this some kind of Indian thing?" He corrected himself. "I mean, Lakota thing?" His elocution on Lakota sounded hollow, forced. "What do you mean?" I asked, hard enunciating, drawing out the vowels. It didn't register. "You know, I meant..." "No, what?" I lied. I knew what he was trying to get at, but I wanted to watch him put his foot in his mouth. "Don't Lakotas have special access to the dead? Or I mean, to those who have passed?" "You mean crossed over?" I said. Yeah, Gavin seemed relieved. "From the happy hunting grounds?" I offered. "Sure, okay, yeah, that's what I meant, I guess," Gavin said. I laughed a little bit, covering my mouth. "Gavin," I said, looking him straight in the eye, "I don't know if clipping coupons and talking about contact paper for the kitchen cupboards with a ghost of my dead mother is an Indian thing or not. My mom wasn't spiritual in that way per se, spiritual in the way you might assume. She loved to tell me whole plot lines to Lifetime movies she'd watched. She collected teddy bears, miniature teddy bears, and she gave them all special names and occupations. Her favorite book was The Thornbirds. Her idea of a spiritual experience was having hash browns and eggs at Beverly's Cafe in Old Town. She loved that place. Well, sure, they make a good fried potato, and their eggs Benny are tip-top too, but fried potatoes, they get that perfect crisp. Gavin trailed off, thinking about breakfast plates. So okay, Gavin said. Not a Lakota thing. He didn't notice my grimace as he got up to refill his cup. I had received my first Moderna shot just a few days before my mother's reemergence. The vaccinations were set up in the Tribal Casinos Event Center. I asked the nurse administrating my dose whether there'd be any side effects, but I should have asked, will there be any unusual side effects? If I had any inkling about what would happen later, I might have asked, and can I expect my dead mother to swoop down from the afterlife and appear in a plume of smoke like Endora from Bewitched? Will she want to play canasta and try out paint samples in the dining room? Will she feel compelled to fuck with Gavin, turn him into a toy poodle? The nurse gave their stock answer. There might be soreness in your arm. Take a couple of Tylenol or Advil. Hydrate and rest if you feel like you're getting a cold. It'll pass. Had I hydrated enough? Was that the problem? Maybe I'd resurrected Mom because I was non-compliant. Just like always. That's Jessie for you, always screwing up, always so selfish. Isn't that why Gavin wants to dump you? Why you can't get pregnant? It had been a few weeks since the night I saw my mother. Since we talked, since we looked at dresses online for Lila's wedding. I was positive that my mother would revisit after my second Moderna dose. But she didn't, and Gavin was so certain I only dreamed it, that I was only trying to stir up drama or sympathy. When Lila and me were little, our Grandpa George lived with and took care of us. He loved to keep us entertained with old res stories, stories about graveyards and thunder beings, about Heyokas playing leapfrog in the hayfields, about highway fatalities and the boy with no eyes. I asked Lila about her memory of Grandpa over brunch one Sunday afternoon. Since she was 2 years older, I thought her recollections might be more reliable. You know, he talked to Grandma Hope, right? Lila said. But she died decades before, I said. He talked to her when he was alone in his room, when the house was quiet. Do you remember how he used to sit in the dark? I nodded. I remembered. He used to spend hours sitting in the dark, sipping from peach schnapps or apricot brandy. That's when he visited with her. I could hear them talking. They laughed a lot. Some nights it was a regular late night with Jay Leno in there. Did Mom know? I had the impression that it was common knowledge, but implicit. We didn't openly discuss it. I guess I want to say that it was normal, Lila said. Do you think this is connected to my seeing Mom that night after my vaccination? Like it's a family trait or something? Maybe, but just so you know, I didn't have any unusual side effects after my shot, Lila said. What do you think? I think I'm cracking up. Gavin thinks I am, I said. Gavin is a jackass. You shouldn't put up with him. He's so unsupportive, Lila said. And she was right, but usually I just let it slide. Grandma Hope and Grandpa George had been high school sweethearts on the res. They married young, at 16 and 17. I used to imagine them dancing at a high school sock hop. Pink ladies and the T-Bird, summer lovin' and grease lightning, like something out of Grease, or fry bread grease, rather. Grandma was a cheerleader. Grandpa played on the basketball team. When Mom turned 9, Grandma Hope died in a car crash, hit by a drunk driver. I remember that Grandpa kept a box of their old letters, love letters. He often sat with a shoebox of letters on his lap, reading through them like they held some kind of spell over him. I loved looking at the old postmarks, the old stamps, their meticulous and looped cursive. It made sense that Grandma Hope visited, talked to Grandpa George in his room at night. They had a special connection. Mom used to say that their love was deep, that I shouldn't settle, that I should wait for a love like theirs. It would be worth the wait. It sounded romantic, but also tragic. I wasn't sure I was up for it. Lila and Lori's wedding had been lovely. It was held outdoors in the gardens at Cedars Lodge near Puget Sound. It had taken place in the window between COVID-19's Alpha variant and the Delta variant. The Alpha and Delta variant sounds like a spy novel. So most of the guests didn't wear masks. She served the salmon and asparagus with wild rice. The seating and altar had been decorated with yellow and white carnations with cedar boughs and eucalyptus. They read out vows they'd written for each other and were wrapped up together in a wool blanket from 8th generation. The only thing noticeably absent, the one person I wished had been there, was Mom. Gavin did not attend. I had asked him to move out. Lila was glad, she said, that I must have had the spirit of our mother to have collected the courage. But really, it was all me. She might have pushed me a little, though. I had stood up at the wedding and shared 2 stories with all the attendees for the wedding toasts. Some years ago, my mother and me had been helping Lila choose a wall color to paint her dining room. We'd been trying to persuade Lila to choose earthy orange colors, adobe or clay, but she liked the various beige colors, not colors at all in our estimation, with names like ecru, buff, and putty. We brushed the selections onto the wall, our sample colors, and because paint dries to a different hue, we had to sit back and wait for them to dry. That's when Mom burst out laughing. We asked, "What's so funny?" And after she managed to stop laughing and collect herself, she goes, "Our lives are just too exciting. Here we are, sitting around, literally watching the paint dry." The other story, Lila and me were still just little. Spring had arrived, the sun was heating things up, and it was time to plant the garden. Mom wanted to put in yellow beans, a type of bean she'd never planted before. She carefully read the instructions out loud, her eyeglasses balanced at the end of her nose. Only plant in full direct sunlight. She looked up from the seed packet, surveyed the sky, the incoming clouds. It was nearing sunset, and soon it would be dark. So Mom got up, brushed away the dirt from the knees of her pants, took off her gardening gloves, and put away the packet of seeds to plant for the next day. The end.
Thank you, Tiffany. I truly believe that when our loved ones have passed, they are still with us. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Charles Johnson. Many of you have heard Charles live, either at Bedtime Stories or another of his readings. Charles is a novelist, essayist, literary scholar, philosopher, cartoonist, screenwriter, and professor emeritus at the University of Washington in Seattle. A MacArthur Fellow, his fiction includes Nighthawks, Dr. King's Refrigerator, Dreamer, Faith and the Good Thing, and Middle Passage, for which he won the National Book Award. In 2002, he received the Arts and Letters Award in Literature from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Charles was among the group that developed the Bedtime Stories concept, and this is his 22nd year of writing for the event. Tonight, he will read his story, Risk.
Don't ask me how I'm doing during this endless pandemic, because I can't tell you. Everything is so fluid, so unpredictable, so like a roller coaster ride. One day, they tell us one thing about how we're doing in our fight against COVID and what we need to do to stay safe. Then the next day, they tell us something else. And I don't like unpredictability and taking risks. Not anymore, not at my age. But that doesn't mean I'm not progressive. Ever since I was a little girl, yes, I know that was eons ago, in the 1940s, but ever since then, I've believed in doing what's right for everyone, you know? Like recycling and doing what I can to stop climate change, which, let me tell you, is making every summer here in Seattle hotter than the last one. So I believe Dr. Fauci whenever I see him on Don Lemon's show on CNN. And I just hate the way stupid people talk about him sometimes. And don't listen when he gives us good advice, like those backward people in Florida who won't get their shots or wear masks, putting all of us at risks. Or the idiots who take ivermectin, that drug used to deworm cows instead of a vaccine improved by the Food and Drug Administration. Are those even dumber people who think a vaccine shot will make them impotent or turn them into a magnet or inject them with some kind of device for the government, run by good Democrats like me, to track them wherever they go? I know that good doctor on TV is doing his best. But this virus is something else, you know? And terrible for me because I don't like germs. It just keeps changing as the scientists and doctors chase it. Anyway, I got both my shots like I was supposed to. Being a senior citizen, I knew I had to do that as soon as the Pfizer vaccine became available. Since the age of 60, I've always known I have more years behind me than ahead. Like most baby boomers, I see leaving life's stage every week now. And sometimes, after a few operations for cataract removal and a hip replacement, I've wondered if the best years for me and this country have come and gone, especially when I wake up wondering which part of me is going to ache or feel like it's malfunctioning. And there's always that fear of losing my balance and falling, since I live alone. I'm just too old now to take risks with what's left of my life. So yes, I went to Northgate Medical Center at 10 a.m., not knowing what to expect, but they had me in and out of there so quickly after I got on their schedule. The first time, a perky young black woman with a silver nose ring and a big tattoo of Nina Simone on her shoulder gave me my shot. Why does everyone I see these days have ink all over their body? And the second time, it was the sweetest man who was about my age. And wouldn't you know it, he looked a little like Dr. Fauci, his hair cobwebbed with gray and his voice calm and reassuring. He said his name was Edward Morris. As he was preparing my second dose of Pfizer, he asked me about myself, and I told him through the mask I was wearing that I was a widow, since my husband of 40 years passed away 5 years ago, and that I just lived by myself with my cat Peaches on Queen Anne Hill. Any children, he asked, or grandchildren? I rolled up my right sleeve and said, a daughter, but she and her husband live on Long Island, so I haven't been able to see them since the pandemic began. I didn't see them much anyway, since they're in their 30s and have their own lives. They had their first child, my grandson, 6 months ago. He's so adorable, and he seems to have my late husband's eyes. I took a deep breath, feeling a little sad for myself, and said quietly, if this pandemic doesn't get any better, and I won't risk getting on an airplane to see him until I know it's safe, then I think sometimes that I might never see my grandson. Edward was nodding and listening carefully to everything I said. He gently patted my hand and spoke in that soothing voice of his. No one knows how long this plague will last. 1 out of every 500 Americans have died from COVID, and there's no end in sight. We're making things up as we go along, hoping for the best. But I do know what it's like to be lonely and living with uncertainty, he said, especially when we all had to quarantine and were afraid to risk getting physically close to each other. He paused and seemed to be talking then as if to himself. Everything's changing. What once worked doesn't seem to work anymore. And I feel a little too long in the tooth now for any more crises. That made me laugh. Me too. But you have a family, right? I did, once, he said. I lost my wife some time ago. We never had kids. I do sometimes do volunteer work here when the hospital is short on staff. That's happening a lot with the virus. You know, I hope you get to see your grandson. Amanda, I think you have a world of experience, knowledge, and wisdom you can share with him. We boomers enjoyed the best of America after World War II, thanks to our parents and elders. If young people are willing to listen, they can learn a lot from us, our successes and failures, mainly from our failures. But from what I'm seeing, these Generation Xers and Yers and millennials seem to think they know everything and don't want to hear the lessons life taught us. He stopped talking for a moment to line up the needle with my right shoulder, then jabbed me with it. And that was it, my second shot. It was over. But it felt like something was just beginning. You'll be fully vaccinated 2 weeks from now, he said. If you're not busy or have other plans, I'd like to have dinner with you. Would that be okay? I'd like to get to know you better. For a second, I was startled, and I said, okay. He wrote his phone number on a sheet of paper and gave it to me. If you have any unpleasant reactions to the second shot, just call me. I left his cubicle in a kind of daze, my feet just following the red arrows on the floor that led me to a big waiting room where people just vaccinated had to sit for 15 minutes to make sure the shot didn't make them woozy or something. I just sat and thought about Edward, how gentle and kind he'd seemed, and what he said about us seniors still having so much to offer others. Although I was flattered by his attention, it didn't surprise me. All my life, I've been what people call attractive. But if you'd asked me earlier if I thought anything good might come out of this global pandemic and all the things breaking down in our country and at this winter season of my life, I would have shaken my head and said, no. Don't get me wrong now. I wouldn't want to repeat a single day of the 7 decades I've lived. They were rich, the best years in American history, like he said. But what did I or anyone else these days have to look forward to? Back at home, I don't drive and took a Lyft. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet and sat at the kitchen table with peaches curled up at my feet, feeling a little wicked when I thought about how long it had been since I'd had a hug, then about Edward and how maybe the coming of age didn't mean that older people couldn't come together. Oh, I didn't quite mean to put it that way, but there it was, since I hadn't been hugged in I don't know how long. And I've never told anyone this, but since my husband passed away, I haven't been able to watch couples on TV kissing, touching, and being affectionate, because seeing that just felt too painful to me. I made myself lunch, did some knitting on a blanket for my grandson, ate a salad for dinner, and then suddenly my brain began to fog. I felt so fatigued I could barely stand or stay awake. I climbed into bed and, to my surprise, slept for a full day. I got up feeling groggy, and then I heard the doorbell ring. When I opened the door, in my PJs and bathrobe, no one was there, but at my feet was a brilliant bouquet of freshly cut roses. Attached to it was a card signed by Edward, saying he hoped I didn't have a bad reaction to my second shot. Okay, I thought, that's it. I needed to find out something about this man. He talked a lot about himself, the way men always do, yet he'd revealed so very little. So I looked him up on Spokio, then on social media, and what I saw there knocked the wind out of me. I found an Edward Morris, all right, a Dr. Edward Morris, who had 3 different addresses in the past 2 years. A news story I read said he'd been head of the surgery department at a hospital in Olympia. That was before he lost his license for taking drugs before performing a surgery and was caught with 15 anti-anxiety and antidepressant pills. I read over and over again what I learned about him with disbelief. He sounded like trouble. I didn't want trouble at my age. Then again, maybe he just had a lot of bad luck, but I didn't want to be around someone with bad luck that might rub off on me. Yet the Edward I'd met seemed so different. I wondered if the stories I read were a mistake or about someone else with the same name. And then my phone rang. How are you feeling? It was you know who. Did you get the flowers? For long seconds, I couldn't find my voice, and he asked, Amanda, are you all right? Were you ever a doctor? There, I said it. But now there was silence on his end. After a spell, he said, finally, were you trolling me? A little, I said. Well, then I guess you know, I was a doctor. I don't know what you read about me, but I'm sure it didn't say I was an excellent physician and well respected until I started feeling overwhelmed. I felt stressed and started self-medicating. The drugs were easy for me to get, and I thought I was in control because, being a doctor, I knew how opioids worked. The problem is, I wasn't in control. No more than anyone else today in any walk of life, not even the president, no matter what they tell you. I worried every day about destroying my reputation, my business, my career, or going to prison. Some people don't know it, but people in healthcare are more at risk for becoming addicted than anyone else. It's an occupational hazard, and it's worse now in some states where they're running out of hospital beds and forced to do triage because of the Delta virus, but I was lucky. What do you mean? I said. Someone reported on me to the state health board. I'm glad he did, yeah. I lost my job and my wife, but that was stopped before I could hurt anyone beside myself. I'm sorry. Don't be, he said. It's all right. I'm on a learning curve, even at 75. I went into a treatment program here at the medical center. I'm in recovery, and I work with the program now to help professionals and first responders overcome addiction, like I had, and get over the feeling they failed. I learned there's always the chance for a second spring if we're not afraid to start over. I can talk more about that over dinner. We can do dinner, can't we? Two aging baby boomers? How about it? I'll let you know, okay? Give me a little time to think about it. And I hung up. I knew I wouldn't return his call. No way. But then I felt, as a courtesy, I should call because he's been so kind and explained why I just wasn't ready to start a new relationship at this late stage in my life. Was I? We both had too much history and baggage, didn't we? I didn't know his friends and relatives, and he didn't know mine. But did any of that matter if we could live in the present, not the past, and make each other happy? Life had settled both of us into impossible to change patterns, eccentricities, and routines, hadn't it? All afternoon and into early evening, I thought long and hard about these questions, about risking my heart for the possibility of a second spring. And then I found the scrap of paper he'd given me with his number, and I picked up the phone.
Thank you, Charles, for a look into taking risks. Now, before we move forward, I want to give an update. We are just under $78,000, so keep making those donations. Remember, a gift at any level helps us meet our goal of $80,000. Now, it is time for us to award the Alaska Airlines tickets. All of you who registered to attend by October 1st are eligible to win 2 tickets to anywhere Alaska flies within the United States. David Powers, Chair of the Humanities Washington Board and Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Seattle University, will join me for the drawing. All right, so let's see who the winner is. I'm not gonna look. All right, Ashley Beach, congratulations. And I can take this from you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I want to thank each of you who've supported Humanities Washington tonight and throughout the year. Our family supports Humanities Washington because of the creative and thoughtful humanities content and programming that the amazing staff at Humanities Washington brings to diverse communities all across the state of Washington. Tonight you heard from the Poet Laureate, you saw the Primetime Family Reading Program, you heard incredible authors here from the region who are internationally known. There's also the Speakers Bureau, so many things that really the staff does. They created a cabin fever program at the beginning of COVID that was truly remarkable and award-winning. So I'd like to take an opportunity to thank my fellow board members, the Humanities Washington staff, and you, Lauren, for planning and executing this amazing event during really challenging times.
Thank you, David. Now, that ends tonight's program. We hope you've enjoyed the stories you heard and learned a little more about the importance of the humanities. We invite you to continue engaging with us. Please take advantage of our terrific lineup of virtual and in-person Speakers Bureau events in the months ahead. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter for details on these events and other happenings. You can also find the full calendar at humanities.org/events. Now let's take one final look at how we're doing. All right, so close to that goal. Remember, every donation supports Humanities Washington programming. There is still time to give. We are so close. Now that is all from Block 41. We hope you've enjoyed being together again virtually. Thank you for joining us, and good night.